Hello and welcome to another episode of our podcast, Knowledge Talks. Now, we are thrilled to welcome Bobby Bray. Now, he is based in Washington, D.C. He specialized in helping Fortune 150 C suite executives navigate the complexities of the global finance, whether it's improving liquidity rating, leading transformative analysis programs, or helping managing billion-dollar portfolio. He brings a unique combination of financial acumen and military precision to deliver results. He has over 20 years in banking and consulting with Capital One, Oliver Wyman, and Regions Bank. Apart from that, he is a retired Navy captain with 4 commands, with a proven track record of strategic decision making under pressure. He is a CFA charterholder with MBA and MA in international finance from the top institutions. As he is here with us, we have picked up a wonderful topic for today's podcast: global finance and strategy for business founders. First and foremost, Bobby, welcome to our podcast and thank you for being a part of it and being a guest.
You are welcome. It's good to be here, and I look forward to what could prove to be a very fruitful conversation. This is a very timely topic.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm sure our viewers and listeners will get a lot of value in the while we are conversing on this topic. So, Bobby, I'm going straight to the topic. My discussion point number one is current state of global growth, resilience with fragile foundations. Now, could you discuss how the global economy is holding steady at around 2.6 to 2.8% growth in 2026, showing resilience despite the policy uncertainty, tariff pressures, geopolitical tensions, and yet growth remains slow to drive, but it is sharing prosperity in many developing markets. Over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the headline very well, and the folks that forecast this, the World Bank, the OECD, the WEF, all those, all came up with a nice consensus number: 2.6, 2.8, 3. Which would suggest, to your point, that it's a resilient economy. But I think the key, especially given all the things that you'd mentioned, like, tariffs, geopolitical tension, policy uncertainty, there's a lot of volatility in the market right now. But the thing to keep in mind is that resilience doesn't necessarily mean strength. Strength is a component of resilience, but it isn't necessarily the same thing. And what we are seeing is that growth isn't fast enough or evenly distributed across all regions, particularly in the developing world. In some areas, it's booming, depending on what their economies are exposed to, what industries. And in our other areas, it's lagging, which is creating disparities across the globe. The overall is a good number, 2.6, 2.8, 3.0, but the regional differences make the difference. So the key for just kind of bringing it home to your viewers is, for a founder, the key decision and the key lens is to ask yourself which regions are growing, why are they growing, under what policy regimes are they growing, and are there any capital constraints? That's a key decision. That's a key point right there. Not all markets are the same. Not all markets are as liquid as other markets. Are the local markets, what currency are they exposed to most? So that brings in some complexity that a lot of times founders don't necessarily think of, and that is FX risk, debt capital markets, those type of things, which are different variables for people to consider. So maybe the key thing is that stable macro growth will support demand. That's an important factor, but it's the regional differences that should be driving strategy, particularly if you're thinking about market entry and pricing, and that sort of thing. Keep in mind that the resilience isn't the same as durability, that the headline growth looks fine, but kind of your strategy should live in the regional differences. And maybe a couple other points real quick. Global strategy, one of the things that it can do, both for good or ill, it can mask local volatilities. So if you have a local volatility in your particular region, it can look good at the top level, at a global level, but a particular regional area can be very, very volatile. And And yeah, I'll tell you that. I know I kind of dumped a lot. Anything you would like for me to go into a little bit more deeply or to expand on, I'll be glad to do so. Don't want to go too far astray though.
Wow, that's pretty well explained, Bobby. Bobby, I have just taken down three of the points. Is that first is that you have said growth is most almost stable in certain places, and there are
Mhm.
some, many a times it's evenly distributed against certain regions. But you have rightly said that we need to do a little more analysis because which reasons are going, what is the reason for its growth, why it is growing, is there any capital constraint on that, and which currency they are exposed to, and these are some real
Yeah,
good pointers which can give a lot of analysis why it is growing, what makes it grow, whether what is the growth
yeah,
potential, what is the forecast for this. Number one. Number two is that you have even said that there is something called stable micro macro growth, and but it
Mhm.
is not so evenly distributed. Certain regions are leaping ahead, certain regions are lagging, and certain regions are more or less stable depending on the various circumstances. But I must say, over these uncertainties and all those things which you are having, certain positive things have come up. A lot of trade deals are getting signed up across the globe. It's
Mhm.
not only with the Western world, Eastern world, even Australia, even Indochina, and all those places. Even Africa is stepping into the different trade agreement, different kind of trade negotiations which are happening.
Correct.
And in
Yeah,
fact, when we are recording this podcast today, it's our Republic Day in India. Now we are
Mhm.
celebrating our Republic Day today. Now,
Mhm.
over here, our chief guests are definitely the people from European Union. So again, it is
Yep.
a very positive indicator how the regional things are getting distributed and all. So
Yeah,
overall, it's a mixed bag. It's something positive,
yeah,
something negative, and that's how it is going on. Now,
yep.
this is taking us to our next point. Now, geopolitical and economic conflicts as business
Yeah.
risk. Now, this is a bit of a worrying topic for many people. But could you
Mhm.
highlight the global economic conflicts? It can come in front of in form of supply chain restrictions, sanctions, trade
Yep.
weaponization, and now
Yep.
even it is identified as top short-term world risk. I know a
Yeah.
short-term world risk is basically a term given by many institutions. It's it may
Yeah.
not carry on for long, but it's something short-term. It may take some legs unless and until some deal is cracked. Now, with this
Yeah.
implications for cross-border expansion and investment
Mhm.
planning, what is the overall scenario you are seeing? Over to you.
Yeah, that's a great topic. One of the things that we've noticed, and these build on it on themselves, by the way, when we talked before about global growth, um, exceptional global growth tends to flourish. Growth tends to happen in very stable geopolitical situations. When there's a predictable geopolitical environment, businesses do well. Things become predictable. If you want to look at it one way, it's very easy to predict stability in a spreadsheet. It's difficult to predict instability and volatility in a spreadsheet. It becomes more difficult and more complex. And what we're seeing right now is that geopolitics has moved from what it was in the past, which was just kind of a background noise, to a core variable, and that's something to keep in mind. It went from something that was an abstract. You always knew that there was a chance that there was a political instability someplace, but it isn't theoretical anymore. We're seeing trade and policy tools used deliberately by large countries and large players, and I'll say that as a person who's sitting in Washington D.C. To reshape competitive outcomes. That is a little bit of a paradigm shift over what we've discovered and what we've experienced over the last, let's just say, 80 years, to put a frame on it. Um, so the real question is, how should founders deal with geopolitics at a heightened level that they might not necessarily have been accustomed to in the past. And what I advise our clients to do is to treat it like a financial risk. And if you had a financial risk, you would map it, you would try to quantify it, you would build a roadmap to deal with it, you would establish triggers that would lead to actions. Um, uh, but the key thing there is that takes time and expertise that a lot of companies didn't necessarily anticipate when they first found. It's a it's a risk set. It's a set of risks that a lot of folks had not necessarily thought about when they're managing their companies. So I say that juxtaposed with the fact that there's still tremendous opportunity in global expansion. The simple adage is if you have a domestic market, and I'll just use US dollars, but if you had a domestic market and the total market was $10 million and you expanded into a global market and the market is $50 million, guess what? You're going to sell more product, your company is going to grow and you're going to expand. That's what you want. The challenge is navigating into those markets nowadays. And you've hit on the big things. Trade restrictions, supply chain nationalism, those things are challenging the assumptions that we've had in place for a long, long period of time. So for a founder, the key thing is if you're going to expand in cross-border, your strategy now must include geopolitical risk. You must map that geopolitical risk, and you must ensure supply chain flexibility. It's no longer just about growth projections. It's no longer about going from 10 to 50. It's about those other things as well. Geopolitical risk is no longer just a headline risk anymore. It's a business. It should be an input into your business decision making. And if maybe a simpler way to look at it is if you think that geopolitics can break your supply chain or impact the market that you're selling into, then it belongs in your strategy. You need to think about it in a long-term perspective. Even if it's only a short-term risk, it can have long-term implications, and you need to take that into consideration. Keep in mind that trade policies move faster than factors. So flexibility is a key hedge. When you're negotiating contracts in a cross-border situation, keep that in mind. Keep in mind that things can, as quickly as things have changed over the last year and a half, they could change again or change back. So ignoring the geopolitics doesn't reduce the risk. It just removes your options. It's a different world we live in, but it's one where the promise is still there. The risks are higher, but any business that's good at managing those risks and identifying those risks and mitigating those risks can see great success. It's just a matter of having the expertise to be able to do it. Again, a bit of a monologue. I'll turn it over to you. I don't know if you want to explore any of those topics further.
Wow, that's very well analyzed. A couple of points I have just taken down. It is very important for the founders to deal with the geopolitical situation. It's not that we can skip, we can ignore for the time being. So this is quite important. Second is that you have to check the financial risk involved in this, because finance is everything. It is always said that the money is the pole around which the whole economy revolves. So definitely we have to check the financial risk, and we have to establish the triggers, the trigger point. If that triggers, we have to immediately take some actions. Action number 1, 2, 3. This establishing trigger is a very important thing. No one can say that I'm not affected by geopolitical situation. Everyone, even from the smallest of the small businesses to the top multinational companies, everyone are. Now, point number 3 is that you have mentioned we must see it as an opportunity rather than a restriction, and you have given so many points, because I have taken 1, 2, 3, probably so many points. First is that we have to deal with the challenges. We have to identify what are the challenges we are facing. We have to analyze point number 2 is identifying the geopolitical risk. If a country is taking some action in any part of the world, how is it affecting our industry, how we are getting affected, and how it is affecting supply chain, etc., etc. Now, if the supply chain is getting affected, definitely you said we have to relaunch our strategy. It's not that we have to carry on with this. Probably we have to diversify, we have to pivot, we have to do everything. Second is that trade policy. We have to keep a note of the trade policies, because that's what is, if whenever two countries are sitting together, what are the pros of it, what are the cons of it, what are the advantage, disadvantage, impacts, good, bad, everything. We have to keep a note of this. Flexibility is the key. I think this is the golden word, I must say. In this, we cannot stick to one situation. Many a times I have seen even the big companies who have already had a laid down contract, a properly signed contract, they are again sitting on the negotiating table and renegotiating their contracts. I have seen even big tech companies doing doing that based on the global scenario. And they always say, both sides of the table have to go, get into some win-win situation. Negotiating
Yep.
contracts, definitely we have to renegotiate the contract if required. And last but not the least, changes happen fast. We have to live with it. It's not that what we had 20, 30 years back, and it's not like that every moment, everything, something or other is getting, decided, and we have to simply live with it. We have to carry on with it. So some very good pointers we got from you, Bobby. Now, coming back
Absolutely.
to the third point is financial leadership trends. Now, this is a bit different, or I must say it is also interrelated. I mean, it's very much related with the global situation. The trends like AI, cloud, and
Mhm.
strategic CFO roles. Now, could you highlight how the finance leaders are expanding from reporting to strategic planning? And this is
Yep.
enabled by AI, tech clouds, etc., etc. Now, this trend the founders should leverage in their own financial functions. How is it? Could you enlighten us on this? Over to you.
I will step back from enlighten, but I certainly have an opinion. So yeah, thank you. That's a great topic, and you're right. There's a certain amount of change that is going on, and we talked about geopolitics and how the change there is impacting companies, global expansion. But you're exactly right that AI and tech, which seem to be an accelerant, are impacting almost as much, and it's probably a topic for an entire podcast. But just looking at the finance function, the CFO role is changing. It's changing dynamically, and it's accelerating it every single day. If you think about what in the old school, a finance function oftentimes is just a scorekeeper. It kept track of what was going on. It might do some slight predictions and projections, and leave it at that. At more sophisticated firms, it was a bigger function than that. The CFO uh, did do more projections and forecasting, but it tended to still have a lag element in it. There was a lag in it because it was not diminishing what a finance function does, because it's where I've spent a lot of my career, but it's a data collection, data manipulation, a little bit of data analysis, and data projection. That's a finance function in a nutshell. Um, every element of that has sped up because of tech, and that's what we're seeing. So therefore, the CFO's role and their engagement and their relationship with tech needs to change in order to keep up. So, what does that mean? It means that the CFO function can now do better scenario analysis. It has clear unit economics. It has a more robust and faster forecasting. All of those things happen, and they're happening quickly. Oftentimes, organizations are not structured in such a way to take advantage of that. And if that's the case, then that finance function is not as strategic as it needs to be in shaping the future of the company. It tends to be a lagging factor. It tends to be a cost as opposed to a revenue stream. Not that it would ever become a revenue stream, but I hope that makes sense. So what do finance teams need? What does the CFO need? Am I suggesting that a founder needs to come up with like an enterprise-wide, large-scale finance team? No, not at all. But what the CFO needs is enterprise-grade visibility. You need to have the same abilities as large companies with the smaller teams. And the good news is it's all available. The tools are now all out there. Just as a bit of an anecdote, I was reading in one of my emails today that Claude from Anthropic has released their Excel spreadsheet, Claude for Excel. I know that's not the first model to do that, but it just shows that spreadsheets are such an important part of finance, and now they're just becoming mainstream in AI. A CFO needs to be able to understand that AI and those tools that are available. So, not to try to get too far astray, but I think the key takeaway here is the CFO and that whole finance function needs to use analytics and planning tools sooner in the process, and they need to feel more comfortable with those tools going forward to take finance from a scorekeeper to a decision engine, not just a compliance function, but something that's critical, sitting at the table making decisions. It shouldn't just describe what happened in the past. It should shape what happens in the future. And that is a little bit of a different mindset, a bit of a paradigm shift for many finance functions. It won't replace AI, and we touched on AI a little bit, but AI won't replace finance leaders. I hear that quite a bit, that, oh, this will take away our jobs. It's not going to replace any finance leaders, but finance leaders who use AIs will replace those who don't. The CFOs who really understand it are going to be better. They're going to be more armed and skilled when they go into the market, and they will replace the ones who can't. So just kind of reiterating, a company doesn't need big enterprise solutions, but they do need big enterprise and big company visibility and capabilities. And they need those capabilities so that the finance function can shorten the distance between data and decisions. If you think about how we had framed it in the first place, all the different data elements, those elements are becoming faster. The gap between them is becoming shorter, which means things are speeding up, and the finance function needs to speed up with them so that it can help in the decision making. Again, a bit of a monologue there. Glad to expand on anything that you'd like.
Wow, that's very well explained. This shift of function is probably it's a complete paradigm shift. It's you have rightly said that a CFO's role are changing. It has to be accelerative role right now. Now they have to also change from scorekeeper to decision making engine. I think this is a very powerful point you have making. Rather than just keeping the story and okay, what is coming out, what is in, finding ledger, journal, and all those stuff. From there, decision making engine, whether a company should take this decision based on which, what is the forecast, what is the conditions like that, what are the market condition, is there any demand in the market, so what are the trade restrictions, what are the taxations, everything they have to put it across, and they have to give a right report that this decision is good for the company or this decision doesn't suit the company, either or. It could be positive, negative. So from a scorekeeper to a decision making engine, I think that's a paradigm shift, I must say. Next is that its role has completely changed, and it need to be strategic rather than it's a record keeper. It has to be strategic. Many times I have seen nowadays in the boardroom meetings, when if the CFO says no, the decision is actually no. Even CEO also cannot overturn the situation, because I have personally seen that in many of the boardroom meetings. So that is one strategy. Next point is that from teams to tools, probably previously that finance used to have one of the largest teams, someone is doing ledger, journal, and keeping some taxation and everything. Now with one AI tool, these all things can be concised, and it can also speeden up the thing, what we call as efficiency, more amount of work done in the lesser unit of time. So with one single tool, that everyone, the work of 10 people can be done in few seconds by one computer probably, or one laptop, or one system probably. From it's again a shift from teams to tools. I think that's a very good point which you have made. Last but not the least, they have to speed it up, and so that they can the company's decision making can be a quick, right, and strategic. I think that's a very well explained how this paradigm shift is happening. Now I'm going to the next point. Now this is about debt, fiscal fragility, and inflation dynamics. Now, could you help us explore the rising government and private debt level, which is happening across the globe, followed by inflation moderation expectations by people, and their effect on credit costs, borrowing strategies, and consumer demand? I think it's a bit different, bit complicated it seems, but I think all are interrelated.
Yeah.
Over to you.
It's a great topic. It's probably an entire class in a college course, but we'll try to do it in the next few minutes. It is at the essence of debt and capital markets globally, and where's all the complexity that we've discussed so far, and the volatility that we've discussed so far, telegraph through capital markets, through debt markets, through inflation into the local markets and the local borrowing costs. Let me unpack that a little bit. So we're seeing a number of, at a macro level, some interesting dynamics. You've touched on it. Government debt across the world, with a few exceptions, is increasing dramatically. The United States is a perfect example: $38.9 trillion in government debt with no end in sight. But the global share of the dollar as a reserve currency is decreasing. In one sense, this is good for U.S. manufacturing because it makes the dollar cheaper, all those kind of things. But in the other sense, it makes it very, very difficult. It makes it more difficult for the United States government to fund its debt in global markets during bond auctions. That has implications down the road. The United States government is adjusted the Federal Reserve is adjusted just in the last 6 months. What they're doing at the long end of the curve. Everybody focuses on the short end of the yield curve, but the long end matters. Where you see things that's playing out. You've seen things, not even just talking about U.S. centric. You've seen debt loads and kind of macroeconomic decisions impacting a long history of kind of a 30 or 40 year history impacting Japan. Japan has had foreign exchange issues over the last few weeks. If you follow the news, you've noticed that there was a fear of default a little while ago for Japan. It's again a whole topic for another day, but you can see that all of these factors, some geopolitical, some geoeconomic, some derived by debt levels, with central banks making decisions. Some central banks aren't quite as independent, or the perception is they aren't as independent as they've been in the past. All of that goes into that cauldron, that mixing ball that determines capital rates. You throw in the fact that there's private leverage is very high as well. And you're seeing a lot of shocks and a lot of volatility as people try to work through it. So what does this mean? At a very low level, at a very macro level, inflation appears to be moderating, but it's not totally gone. And the question is, and every central banker will wear a central banker hat for a little bit, every central banker is trying to figure out how supply disruptions, energy shocks, policy shifts are going to impact the cost of capital. We know that they impact prices, but how are they going to impact borrowing costs down the line? And it's almost too challenging to make a bet. It's silly to make a bet. What should founders do? I guess that's the crux of it. What should a founder do? And the key is to model ranges, not just point estimates. In the past, you could hone in. Let's just go back 5 to 10 years. The central bank said, we think inflation next year is going to be 2.6%. A founder could model 2.5, 2.4, 2.7, and they'd be fine. If they modeled 2.6, they were fine. Now, that is not wise to do. Model ranges, not just point estimates, is a key takeaway from this. And the ranges should be around interest rates, financing risk, refinancing risk, customer demand, long-term capital needs for the company. Those should now be range bound as opposed to point estimates. And then they can, going back to the AI discussion we just had, the nice thing is those ranges can now be tested and stressed using modern financial tools. So you can get a really, really good sense of where you are, but it's going to be range, and a range necessarily increases ambiguity. Decisions are not going to be as easy as they were before. Many of your decisions are going to be based on weighted probabilities as opposed to a definitive answer, which should the intuition there should be that there's more complexity in this than there used to be. Because we were specifically talking about debt. Debt doesn't kind of kill companies, but surprises in the debt markets oftentimes do. Debt costs do. And maybe a different way to frame it is that in the past, the cost of capital was treated as a bit of a constant. We had a pretty good idea what it was going to be next year, some certainty of the year after that, maybe a little bit more, but some certainty 2 or 3 years down the road. Now it's more variable than ever, and we're feeling that through the system. And maybe the one, if I had one key takeaway is, if your model only works in one rate environment, in one scenario, it's not really a strategy, it's a bet. And that is not where you want to be in a finance function or running a founder running a company, is betting on one outcome. Just not a prudent way to do it. More complexity, but again, with complexity comes opportunity.
Wow, I think it's a very complicated topic, but you have explained it really well. Now, first point which I have just taken, it's something about the policy shift which you have just started with. Now, policy shift is happening every now and then. So, first and foremost, we have to this impacts everything. This impacts price, this impacts demand, and everything. Now, I feel first and foremost, it's the founder at this stage should make it a habit to study the policy shift, whether it is a global policy shift, competitors policy shift, or any other neighbors policy shift. Everything.
Yeah.
Now again, it's
Yep.
it's not so easy to understand that, but it is not difficult to get that either. So it's something like that. So next is that as a founder, one should definitely check the different risks involved. Of course, you have mentioned that finance risk, refinancing risk, and definitely long-term finance risk, short-term, etc. All this. Now, overall, this is making a bit difficult for the founder, especially the startups at certain point to start up. But many think I think this is the new normal we have to get into. We have to follow up the
Yeah.
market, we have to follow up the policy decision, what are the trade decisions happening. This is something which should be ongoing, because what we studied in our business school around 20 years back is completely different what the scenario we are seeing today. So like that,
Yep.
5 years, 10 years down the line, definitely situations are going to be difficult. Definitely situation going
Mhm.
now, let me rephrase it. Situations may not be difficult, but dynamic. We have to live with this
Yeah.
dynamic situation. Difficult,
Yep.
every situation is difficult, nothing is easy, but this dynamic, this policy shift, you have to get used to it. And analysis, I think, is the best thing. Analyzing and re-strategizing one's decision, I think this is something which one has to do it on a regular basis. And that's how
Mhm.
we have to re-strategize the business policies or business
Totally
strategies,
agree.
I must say. Now,
Totally agree.
to the next topic. Now, founder strategies for the trade and supply chain disruptions. Now, could you enlighten on the impact of the trade barrier and tariffs on global
Mhm.
sourcing and cost structures, and especially for the founders scaling internationally? Over to you.
Yeah, that's a great topic. And speaking of paradigm shifts, this is a paradigm shift. This is what's old is new type mentality. Uh, I think if you could say that structurally from about the 1940s until about the 2010s or so, if there was one way to describe international trade, it was a consistent, persistent decreasing in trade barriers and increase in globalization. It was the height of, we were leading into the globalization era. The world was flat, everything was getting closer, and that has shifted in the last 10 years across the world, not just coming from the United States, but trade barriers are the new normal. They're slowly but surely creeping up. In some cases, they increase dramatically, but that is a different way of viewing the world. At first, it was those increases in the restrictions and the barriers were slight and small and could be adapted to pretty easily. But now they're becoming larger and they're more persistent. And the global blocks that we had, the trading eras have started to break down. We're getting into an era of more bilateralism, where bilateral trade agreements are becoming the new normal, and that is requiring a shift in strategy and thinking for founders and companies. There used to be if you just kind of encapsulate, and I know this is not fair because you're talking with broad brushes, but if you just encapsulate the last 30 or 40 years, what we were seeing was single country optimization that was based on cost. You could figure out where the cheapest place to get a particular product or where your supply chain should go. You would locate that create a supply chain there, optimize cost, and it's one of the reasons we saw persistently low and decreasing inflation, to the point where a few years ago, particularly in the United States, like 7 or 8 years ago, we were talking about deflation concerns, and were we going to go into a deflationary position because inflation was so low? We don't have that anymore. Those supply chains have been disrupted, and it's no longer enough to just look at supply chains should be optimized for cost. They should also be optimized for survival. COVID-19 actually taught us that lesson in very painful terms in some cases. Your supply chains need to not just be cheap, they need to be durable and resilient. One of the topics that we started with was the resilience of all these things. So what should a founder do? A founder should look at and realize that the single country optimization is no longer ideal, and that it should give way to kind of a multinodal resiliency strategy, which means dual sourcing, regional suppliers, near shoring are the terms that you're seeing right now, contingency planning, that type of complexity. Again, the world is becoming a little bit more complex. That type of complexity is required to safely navigate kind of the global economic world that we live in. Geographic diversification and strategic sourcing are essential if you want to scale globally. But again, one of the themes that we've talked about so far is in the complexity that comes from that diversification and strategic sourcing comes opportunity. So those companies that can navigate that properly and can decipher it and decode it maybe are the ones that are going to prosper in the world of the future. Maybe just kind of reiterating a few points. So the world of the single source is sliding into the rearview mirror. Single source efficiency looks great until it faces the first shock, which is kind of the COVID-19 lesson. That resilience is expensive, which is something that people are optimizing for now, is resilience. And it is expensive in the moment, but it is actually cheaper than the disruption that you're avoiding, which is the key thing to think about it. Building in resilience into your system is a bit like buying insurance. You hope you never need the insurance, but the reason we all have insurance is that when something goes wrong, the insurance looks really, really cheap compared to what could happen. And I think we're seeing that in supply chains and in the trade and in the world of trade, because geographic diversification now has to be part of the margin equation. When you're figuring out what your margins are, and you're figuring out the cost of capital, and you're figuring out the next product and what's it going to cost, you have to have geographic diversification with resilience embedded in that in order to make a wise decision.
Wow, that's very well explained. Again, I have taken down certain points. You have rightly mentioned that, around 20 years back or so, that reduced trade barriers and increased globalization was the norm. But now the trade barriers can be treated as a new normal. This is number one. Number two is an era of bilateralism. Now, this is a strategic shift, I must say. That single country optimization is no longer an option. Of course, we have to, because that was based on the cost sensitive thing. Whichever country or whichever region giving us a cost effective offer, we used to go for that. But I think that may not be the right option at this point of time, with increased trade barriers, government policy shifts, etc., etc. Now, what the founders can do. Number one, you have rightly mentioned that single country optimization is absolutely no. People should completely come out of that thing. Regional suppliers, definitely we have to find the regional suppliers, because when this COVID was there, we have when the borders were closed and everything, it has actually taught some brutal lessons. We were analyzing and discussing one concept called internationalization to localization. Okay, internationalization is fine. We are growing with global, partners and all this thing. But at the same time, our localized production should also be there. So if any such kind of things happen, or any such kind of border closure happens again, we can still secure our supply from the regional player, from internationalization to localization. Okay. Next is, of course,
But
founders must go for contingency planning. Now, this is
Mhm.
must. We can never know what's tomorrow or new policy shift or other restriction can come up. This contingency plan or contingency planning financially can give us some time to re-strategize and rework and start getting product from that. Make the new strategy productive. That time we can get only if we have done a right contingency planning, contingency funds, and all those stuff. If you have done now, geopolitical, it's not geopolitical, it's geographical diversification. That's important. Now, this is again the single country optimization, and the other side is the geographical diversification. It's just reverse of each other. So, some very good pointers which we have got. Now, this is bringing us to the last point of today's discussion. Now, macro risk and strategic preparedness. Now, can you just help us and understand and look at the broader risk, recession probabilities, now market sentiment swing, and investor cautions? Now, how the founders can plan for downturns with lean operations and strong margins? Over to you.
Yeah, it's a great topic. I think it gets to the crux of what a founder should be trying to do, and that is prepare for the future. And because the dynamics and the inputs have changed that we've talked about so far, the challenge is preparing for a future that's less certain than it used to be. But the thing that founders should be pleased with is that, in a sense, what's old is new again, and that business is becoming, and business has never really changed this, but it becoming even more so like it used to be, and that is it's foundational on the basics. So what are the basics? If you were to just look through the lens of, we've talked about debt before, but if you were just look through the lens of a lender or an investor, what are they rewarding nowadays? They're rewarding businesses with strong margins, liquidity discipline, and operational flexibility, and that has really always been the case. So if you have strong margins and you manage your company well, you're in pretty good shape. If you have liquidity discipline, and by that, maintaining more liquidity than you necessarily thought you should, but doing so as an abundance of caution, limiting maybe if you keep too much liquidity, you're limiting your growth prospects, but you're increasing your resilience. That's a good thing in this current market, and being operationally flexible. We've already talked a little bit in terms of supply chains. We didn't really get into it, but product mix matters as well. Geographic diversification matters as well. All of those things are type of operational flexibility. And we can talk about them a little bit more, but the key is that how do you, with all these variables changing, they're getting down to the fundamentals, but how do you navigate the future? Because how do you do strategic preparedness? One of the things that in my work we look at is scenario planning. Scenario planning is probably more critical than it's ever been in maybe my business lifetime. And scenario planning needs to be a dynamic thing, and it needs to be something that you look at from consistently. If you think about all these different variables, and we're trying to project things and we're trying to plan for things, we end up, if you're familiar with like stochastic modeling and Monte Carlo projecting and all those type of things, the number of variables that go into a projection like that have increased. The nice thing is that we have the tools to hold variables and look at individual variables as we project the future. And what we find under all this level of uncertainty that we're faced with right now is the range of outcomes becomes wider, which necessarily means that the risk distribution also becomes wider. That's the challenge that founders are facing right now. And scenario planning will help founders to think through all the different path-dependent outcomes that could possibly happen, so that they can do the things we talked about. Protecting liquidity. There's an adage that I've always heard that I've loved, which is liquidity is a bit like oxygen. Having it 96% of the time isn't sufficient. You do need it all the time. And oftentimes liquidity is not managed that way. And preserving, in a finance term, preserving the optionality that comes with strategic flexibility. And that's one of the things that should be focused on. So if you get more flexible, you have more optionality, which allows you to be more dynamic and flexible moving forward. And to kind of summarize it a little bit is that the goal is no longer predicting the future. That used to be what strategic preparedness was we'll predict a future and then we'll work towards it. But the goal should no longer be about predicting the future. It should be getting ready for several of them, which is a little bit of different mindset. And I would also suggest that optionality might be the most underrated asset on a founder's balance sheet. And that optionality is paid for with excess liquidity. And I think you're seeing that the companies that are navigating these kind of rough waters right now have a lot of optionality and one of the things is they have a lot of capital and liquidity. Also, just kind of keeping in mind that when we talk about operational flexibility, I forget to mention, but that lean operations buy you time. If you have very lean operations that are still able to be flexible and you are not too leveraged in your operations, if that makes sense, then it buys you time. You are able to be more flexible. You're having the luxury of flexibility, but that goes hand in hand with managing liquidity. Excess liquidity buys you time as well. So those are, again, cornerstone basic business fundamentals, but they're necessary even more so in the current world that we're in. And the final plug is that scenario planning should not be viewed as a bit of a pessimistic exercise. What it is it's a bit of enforced discipline, professional discipline on a company. So it's a dynamic world. Putting those all into considering all those things means that you need a structured, systematic way of doing it. The thing that the tool that we've found works very, very well is using scenario planning. There's other things you can do as well, but the exercise of thinking through those is probably even more beneficial than the actual outcome and the answer that you'd get from them.
Well explained, well said. A couple of things which I have just taken it down, definitely, first and foremost is that definitely one has to manage the company well. Now, how? That's again a lot of points. Supply chain is something which has to be, planned out in a very scientific way based on the different policy, not only for today, but probably we have to also, plan the supply chain for tomorrow. Diversification is definitely the key. We cannot no longer depend on the single vendor or single supplier. That's there. Strategic preparedness, scenario planning, and risk distribution. I think these three are the golden words, I would say, of today's conversation. Strategic preparedness, definitely, whatever, strategy is important. Now, we can have another session on strategy probably, but strategy is a very big subject. Now, strategic planning covers everything, whether it could be supply chain disruption, market trend disruption, it could be a shift in customer preferences, it could be anything. Risk distribution. Again, this is another big topic for discussion. We have to analyze what kind of risk we can get because of a policy shift. It could be supply disruption, again, market preferences, or probably it could be an export restrictions. It can be a lot of things like this. So this risk analysis followed by the distribution is once again the key. And reserving optionality. Now, I think you have rightly said that this is the most underrated asset for any founders. Optionality is that we need to really explore this subject, reserving optionality, because it's again directly proportional to the flexibility. If you are flexible, of course we are having more options, and vice versa. Now, I think in this situation we have to really focus on this optionality, because we cannot live without that. Either we live with it, be dynamic, adopt, or perish. Simple, straight out.
Well said.
Yeah. And the two more points which you have given, additional points, is goal is not predicting the future. I think again, this is a golden word which you have gained. We have to be ready for all kind of ups and downs. Now, these ups and downs will be there, and of course, these, as you have rightly pointed out, these trade barriers and this global, global, this uncertainty can be the new normal. We have to deal with it. Probably the way our parents and grandparents have lived their lives, of course, we and our children will not be living the life like that. Our life will be completely different, and we have to live with it. So, some very good points which we got from you, Bobby, and this is bringing us to the end of our talk show. And really, this was a great, great thing. Any closing remarks would you like to put for us?
Yeah, I would say, if I were to kind of try to encapsulate the discussion that we've had today, and maybe the anything that I could offer to founders, is that it is a bit of a mind. There's some shifting that's going on in mind. A lot of times when we talk about strategic projections, founders are doing that in order to try to get certainty in the marketplace. But I don't think certainty is becoming harder and harder to acquire. But clarity, and I would suggest that maybe we don't want certainty, but we want clarity. If you're really, really clear about who you are and what you're capable of and what your company is capable of, that will allow you to go into areas that are uncertain and still flourish. That's the key. That's a key point. I would also suggest that resiliency should not be seen as a defensive measure. That resiliency actually can be a bit of a competitive advantage for founders. That a resilient operation and a flexible operation will allow those companies to grow and to prosper and to continue to flourish in what might be a bit turbulent times. And that actually reminded me, one final thought is that as you look forward to the future and you try to do your strategic planning, keep in mind that the winners of this game, this environment that we're in, isn't about the best forecasters. It's going to be about the fastest adapters.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful, knowledge share and a lot of takeaways for me as well. Of course, I'm sure our viewers and listeners will definitely benefit for it, but you will not believe how much 5-6 pages I have taken down the notes while you were speaking. And this is going to be it's going to be some very good reading material for me. Thank you so much. And this is bringing us to the end of our talk show. And I would like to personally thank Bobby for being a part of this show and sharing us so much knowledge about the global situation, how we can handle this new normal of the trade barriers, and he has done a wonderful and thorough analysis of the situation, what founders should do, what founders should not do, and so on. So it was a very good session we had. Now, if any one of you would like to connect with Bobby, I will give his social media handles and connect the description of this episode. I'm sure all of you would like to follow him and connect with him for this. And I'll give his LinkedIn handle also. That's how we got connected, and we are recording this wonderful, conversation. And he has got some very good stuff in his LinkedIn profile. Please read it, and I highly recommend that. Thank you so much, Bobby, for being a part of the show. And to my podcast listeners, I request for a review. I want an honest review how my podcast is helping you and enhancing your life. I'll be back with many such episodes. Till then, stay tuned, stay connected. Have a good day. And once again, my personal thanks to Bobby for being a part of the show.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here. It's great to chat with you today.